Every once in a while, you come across a musical that is so obscure, but at the same time so incredibly bizarre, you can't believe it's real. This is one of them. Hello folks, and welcome to Jack Reviews Musicals. My name is Jack, and I am a musical theater superfan based in St. Louis, Missouri. This is my YouTube channel where I share my thoughts on all of the musical productions that I see in the area. And for this, the first review of 2026, I have the distinct privilege of talking about New Line Theater's production of Promenade, which is currently playing at the Marcel Theater from now until the 28th of March of 2026. So this production is quite auspicious for New Line. Ever since Promenade first premiered off-Broadway in 1969, it really just doesn't get done, like at all. There has rarely been a full-scale revival of Promenade. For his part, New Line Theater's artistic director and executive producer Scott Miller has said in interviews that he's been wanting to do Promenade pretty much since the beginning of the company, and that was back in like 91. This has been a bucket list musical for him, but every season Promenade would get passed up for other opportunities. And according to Miller, Promenade would always be kind of discounted on default, because even according to him, it is the strangest musical he has ever encountered. But New Line is no stranger to being strange. They're a company that hasn't really gotten anywhere by playing it safe, with the state of the world currently the strangest that it's ever been, and with the company's financial future on the line because of the current state of arts funding in America. New Line finally thought that there was no time to produce Promenade than right now. And it turns out they were right. To understand Promenade's strangeness, I need to explain the setup for the story. It seems super simple and easily approachable for a general audience. Two escaped convicts, simply known by their serial numbers 105 and 106, are trying to evade a bumbling jailer trying to throw them back in. And along the way, they come across a bunch of colorful characters. A party of immature aristocrats, the Misters R, S, and T, and the Mrs. I, O, and U, a showgirl who pops out of a cake at their party, their servant who acts as essentially an overworked babysitter, a mother searching for her two children like she's the central protagonist of a melodrama, the mayor of the city who is a total slimeball, and two soldiers who don't even know what they're fighting for in the first place. All of them connected together into vaudevillian vignettes that spout social commentary about greed, justice, the cruelty of existence, and all that good stuff. So, Promenade is pretty easy to explain, and it's even easier to grasp. What it especially has going for it is the material itself, starting with the score by Al Carmines. The musical arrangements are very jazzy and waltz-like. The tunes in this show are earworms. The melody of the show's opening march has been stuck in my head for the past week now. Da 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 da. Thankfully, it's a recurring motif throughout the show, so you are guaranteed not to forget it. And the vocal arrangements too are beautiful. The harmonies are rich and the solos are stellar. The songs are performed by an ensemble cast of 15 actors who each get a chance to shine in an insightful, heartfelt, and funny as hell libretto written by Maria Irene Fornes. Favorite lines in the show include, "I know everything, half of it I really know, the rest I make up. There's the one thing I've learned from life is that life has not learned from me. There is no wisdom without joy. I was there when you were not, you were there when I was not. Don't love me, sweetheart, or I might stop loving you." Now, point is, the songs in this are catchy. Combine that with fun characters, a smart sense of humor. Promenade seems at the outset like a perfect show for an ensemble-based theater company, even one that isn't as avant-garde as New Line. So what's not to love? Promenade is one of the very few pieces of musical theater to come from one of the most important theatrical movements of the 20th century. The theater of the absurd. Absurdist fiction, including theater, emerged in post-war Europe in response to World War II, exposing how ridiculous and unreasoning and random the world is, inspired by the boom of existentialist schools of philosophy, incorporating the teachings of Friedrich Nietzsche and Soren Kierkegaard and Albert Camus. The goal of absurdism as a philosophy is to reconcile the incongruity of humanity searching for meaning and purpose of life in a cold, unfeeling world. Theater of the absurd was a rejection of the well-made play that's become the standard of theater at the time. Because existence is random and meaningless, we may as well have our art reflect that. So absurdist theater embraces the artificiality of the art form. Absurdist theater does not have conventional plots, nor does it have dialogue that sounds like anything a real person would say. There's no semblance of character progression, except to say that the situations that they go through are disjointed, with very little meaning. Absurdism is the wheelhouse of playwrights such as Samuel Beckett, Eugene Ionesco, Jean-Paul Sartre. Those plays emerged immediately into post-war Europe, like around the 40s and 50s or so. It wasn't until the 1960s that absurdism became an American phenomenon. And on the theater side of things, that was made possible by two New York City-based artists who happen to be the creators of Promenade. First is Al Carmines, the composer. He was a gay Italian-American actor-musician, and from 1961 to 1981, he served as a minister of the Judson Memorial Church in Greenwich Village. Greenwich Village was the thriving fine art capital of New York at the time, and many would argue still is. And that's exactly what Carmines embraced. As an artist himself, he wanted to use his ministry of the church to focus on supporting the arts, encouraging the creation of the arts within the church, and to be progressive and inclusive about doing such a thing. So, in 1963, he used his connections to form the Judson Poets Theater in the basement of the church, allowing Carmines and other theater makers to mount plays and musicals that were too anti-commercial for Broadway and too experimental for off-Broadway. One such artist was Carmines' collaborator on Promenade, librettist Maria Irene Fornes, a lesbian Cuban-American playwright. It was through Fornes' unique life experience that she would write 40 plays and musicals, all of them experimental. They were existential, absurdist meditations on pretty much everything that affected her identity. Feminism, LGBT+ issues, and the Hispanic-Latino experience in America. She was a theater professor at NYU teaching playwriting, and she was the director of the International Arts Relations Hispanic Playwrights in Residence Lab. Located in Hell's Kitchen, she mentored generations of playwrights of Hispanic origin, and influencing the works of many others. She's been called the greatest American playwright you've never heard of. Al Carmines and Maria Irene Fornes were at the vanguard of the experimental theater movement in New York City, which became known as Off-Broadway. Popping up out of the woodwork at the same time were theaters like the La Mama Experimental Theater Club, Cafe Chino, and Theater Genesis, the collective work of whom would inspire the wave of non-profit professional theater across America that started in the late 20th century and continues to this day. And New Line Theater was a part of that movement. So you could say that New Line's success can be attributed especially to Off-Broadway and Promenade in particular. And this musical has every hallmark of the theater of the absurd. Broad comedy with over-the-top jokes, including the cliche of the showgirl popping out of a cake, disjointed vaudevillian musical numbers, darkly ironic imagery with biting social satire, existentialist angst, non-sequiturs, including a song where the lyrics are entirely in French. And of course, the center of it all, the action of the story being very repetitive and ultimately pointless. But the cyclical nature of the plot is in service of Promenade's central idea, which is also that of absurdism. That life is repetitive, that existence is pointless. Whether you are a prisoner, a member of high society, whether you're serving a cause, or just trying to survive. But even though it is angsty, it's not drab. Promenade is a musical that revels in that, using raucous comedy and outrageous stage tableaus to keep us laughing in the face of existential dread. It's not a depressing musical, though it does reveal pretty depressing things. The reason why it is so underperformed is because of the fear that general audiences are gonna have issues with its absurdist trappings. And that fear is not irrational. Like, I have heard of people who went to see New Line's production recently and just straight up walked out. Absurdist fiction doesn't appeal to everyone. However, I am exactly the type of person that absurdism appeals to, so musicals like this are right up my alley. If there's one thing you can take away from me that everybody can agree on, it's this. Promenade is not a musical that you can just go into knowing nothing about. You have to know going into this that Promenade is an absurdist dark comedy. For a good comparison, in my opinion at least, Promenade feels like a cross between Monty Python's Flying Circus and Ren and Stimpy. The dialogue is very witty, and the humor is very sharp in its satire, but the performances, the directing, and the imagery are straight out of a cartoon. Much of the actions, like eating food and digging holes, these are pantomimed in the most traditional sense of the word, like comically exaggerated. Most of the characters in the show are either total idiots who act like children, or they're jaded adults who are perpetually bored and confused. And you're probably wondering, what was the part of the show that made me do this thumbnail face? That actually legitimately happened while I was watching the show, by the way. It was in Act 2, where the aristocrats gather for a picnic at a battlefield. The song that accompanies this, Spring Beauties, has bombs flying everywhere as the aristocrats take the two soldiers, plant them in the middle of the playing area, back to back, and they turn the soldiers into a maypole, using their bandages as the garland ribbons for a children's maypole dance. This is probably the most iconic number of the show, and the most on the nose it goes with its social commentary, especially in real life, as we are continuing to see people of privilege thinking of war as a game. That image of the soldiers becoming a maypole was completely and utterly bonkers. Like, I literally had to do this to make sure that my eyes were not deceiving me. I couldn't believe what I was watching. Was this a real musical that really exists in the real world? Or was this a fever dream induced by a moonshine-fueled screening of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas? And I wouldn't be surprised if the co-directors of New Line's production, Scott Miller and Chris Moore, were influenced by those exact same things when developing their directorial vision. Their staging of the show is over-the-top campy, turning the 3/4 thrust spacing of the Marcel Theater into a playground, where the actors essentially get to mug at the audience for 2 hours. The movements are big, the pacing is madcap, the performances are voice actors in the booth levels of extreme. But Miller and Moore were wise enough to listen to the material, including the moments where they slowed it down, allowing the audience to soak in the craziness that we've been witnessing non-stop. My favorite example of this has to come from A Poor Man, which comes immediately after Spring Beauties. Seeing the absolute insanity of the soldiers' maypole dance. 105 and 106 tend to the soldiers by unwrapping and untangling them from the bandages, all the while singing this beautiful duet about humanity's desperation to remain carefree amongst random cruelty. Broad maximalism juxtaposed with quiet simplicity. Callousness followed by kindness. That is absurdism in a nutshell. It's quite effective dramatically. Miller and Moore clearly put a lot of thought and care into the presentation of this show to make this script compelling, including the songs, the solos, the group scenes, the full ensemble numbers, and the use of the ensemble on stage is excellent, moving around the minimal playing space there is with ease, performing Livy Potoff's whimsical choreography with enthusiasm. Their renditions of the songs are made exquisite thanks to musical director Jason Eschoffen. By the by, because Promenade is so rarely done, Eschoffen had the task of basically reconstructing the score damaged by neglect, and it's very seamless actually. The music was beautifully arranged for New Line's 7-piece jazzy waltz combo, with Eschoffen himself on the keys, Chris Tressler on the trumpet, Chuck Evans on violin, John Gerdes on bass, Adam Levitt on trombone, Mary Wiley on reeds, and Joe Winters on percussion. Oddly enough, one of my favorite moments from the band musically was actually the very beginning, with the slow build-up to the opening march, starting with the violin, then incorporating the piano, and then the rest of the band joins in as they increase in tempo while the ensemble marches on stage. It was a really effective opening that set the tone for the show perfectly. But as for the rest of the songs themselves, they were expertly balanced between the actor's sound and the band's sound. Credit to sound designer Ryan Day for that. To speak of the ensemble, some of the actors are better at performing this absurdist style than others. They're more capable of the fearlessness absurdism requires. Some are true masters of that. But their varying experience actually leads them to feeling like a cohesive ensemble. They have great chemistry together, and their individual performances have great verisimilitude to them, taking the scripts that even itself argues shouldn't be taken that seriously, and giving it its own inner life. Ron Motley and Twain Noah are a good pair as 105 and 106. The determination and the giddiness as they escape and blend in with the aristocrats and stealing things from them. It's an enthusiasm that's contagious. They also make believable the confidence in their affirmations. Money makes you dumb, the clothes make the man, and the moments where they're either being depressed or expressing kindness feel earned. The two of them have great harmonies together. In their duets, A Poor Man, the powerful ballad, and The Passage of Time, which is much more of a comedy song. They have a good vocal contrast with each other that visually on stage is quite amusing to see, with Motley as 105 being a tall, higher-pitched voice, and Noah as 106 being shorter, with his voice being a low rumble. During the show, 105 and 106 make fast friends with the servant, who share the common opinion that the aristocrats are so dumb. And the dynamic between Motley, Noah, and Stephanie Merritt as the servant was really good. The numbers that the three of them share, The Clothes Make the Man, the cigarette song, and the Act 1 finale, Crown Me, were quite cute. And Merritt, for her part, is hilarious in her portrayal of how beleaguered the servant is, slouching and pouting with exasperation at the aristocrats, making her takedowns of them and relief when she escapes from them satisfying. And Merritt has a beautiful, legit soprano in her big solo, Listen, I Feel. The trio then get an ally to make them a quartet, The Mother, played by B. Meesey, in a comedy tour de force. Broad, gesturing, elongated manner of speaking, and forlorn demeanor made for a characterization that was hysterical beginning to end. One moment they're singing Two Little Angels about how much they miss their children, and the next they go, "Have you seen my babies?" Multiple times, with the pause in between each instance growing longer and longer, and then finally they go, "No, bye," and then just dawdles away. Like, they just brought the house down, full stop. Another great juxtaposition. Towards the end of the show, Meesey sings the beautiful ballad A Mother's Love, coming to terms with the fate of her children. And then they sing the 11 o'clock number, I Saw a Man, which is an up-tempo affair, where they say, even though they are completely insane, they're not going to spend the rest of their life trying to hide it. They are going to unabashedly live their own truth, which definitely needs to be an anthem for the TikTok generation. Mother is most likely going to be the fan favorite character of New Line's mounting of Promenade, and B. Meesey was a huge part of making that happen. This is definitely their best work since Bat Boy. Speaking of actors in Bat Boy, topping their previous performance is another potential fan favorite, the villain, the jailer, played by Ian McCreary. McCreary plays the jailer as the quintessential Keystone Cop. Icky sleaziness, a haughty voice, and physical comedy that is impressively choreographed and executed. McCreary's very amusing performance as the jailer, with his failed efforts to catch the prisoners, and the readiness with which he will put anybody in jail. His particular interpretation feels like a cross between Javert from Les Mis and Peter Sellers as Jacques Clouseau from the Pink Panther movies. Probably a more hilarious pop culture combination than anything that I have proposed. By far, the most campy characters in Promenade are the aristocrats. The adult socialites gathering for a banquet at a fancy hall, but act like spoiled children at a Chuck E. Cheese. The Misters R.S.&T are played by Chris Moore, Kent Koffel, and Robert Doyle, respectively. They're a great trio of pretentious fops who think they're suave and charismatic, but when the chips are down, reveal themselves to be nothing more than flounders. Moore, Koffel, and Doyle were giving Marx Brothers. They were giving Three Stooges, especially during the party scene in the middle of Act 2, when they were desperately trying to make the mayor laugh lest they be thrown in jail. The Mrs. I.O.U. complimented their wackiness with uppity airs that make them seem demure until they get the opportunity to let their true colors fly. One standout is the Mrs. stripping to their underclothes in the presence of Miss Cake because they want to be naked too, which sets up a fun payoff involving the jailer that you have to see to believe. The Misses each get their own solos where they reject the Mister's romantic advances. The most emotional of them is Kathleen Dwyer as Miss I, in her song A Flower, a coloratura-forward ballad justifying why she is rejecting Mr. T's offering of a plain and simple flower, with a performance that satirically evokes the great high society singers like Edith Bouvier-Beale, or Florence Foster Jenkins to an even lesser extent, like pretty much the exact opposite of Jenkins. Dwyer's voice in this is absolutely stunning. Benny Gillette as Miss O plays up the unattainable fantasy of the goddesses of American cinema. Elizabeth Taylor, Jane Mansfield, Marilyn Monroe. Her solo, The Moment Has Passed, is the perfect takedown of Mr. S's gross crossing of personal boundaries, balancing heart with rage, with the extreme rage, of course, being represented by Miss U's Capricious and Fickle, performed by Chelsea Johnston as she goes off on Mr. R for rejecting her advances and being a serial womanizer. Johnston plays the disaffected modern rich girl persona with alacrity. Miss Cake is played by Lauren Tenenbaum, exaggerating the character's Vegas showgirl sexiness so ridiculously that it circles back around to being cute, which somehow even makes her more alluring. Like her solo, Chicken Is He, is a funny, earnest call for body positivity and to dismiss those who put you down as cowards. As she puts it, I'm not a morsel, I'm a feast. Another anthem for the TikTok generation. Tenenbaum as Miss Cake is paired up with William Smith III as the mayor, whose loud, boorish personality is a huge contrast to Cake's seductiveness. The desperation for everyone to laugh at his incomprehensible stories and bad jokes. The Queen of Hearts as temper tantrums at the slightest provocation, the playful doting on Miss Cake, and the schadenfreude of having a picnic while a war was unfolding. Smith's performance is so close for comfort to actual politicians. His over-the-top pompousness makes him a great comic vehicle. Nathan Meese and Michael Kramer round out the cast as the small ensemble roles. The waiter and the busboy of the banquet hall who share a very adorable waltz during Bliss. A driver and a pedestrian who get caught in a case of mistaken identity that I will not spoil for you. And the soldiers who get used as the maypole. The soldiers are the roles that Meese and Kramer get the most mileage from, doing well to play how uncomfortably blasé they are. are about what they're fighting for. Macy has a great song called Mr. Sidney and Phelps, where even when he's all banged up, he can still find the time to complain about something as mundane as one time where he ate at a really bad hamburger stand. The campiness of the actors is matched well by the bright, colorful production design, which purposefully resembles children's drawings of what this story might look like in visual form, emphasizing the immaturity of this adult story. The ensemble's costumes, designed by Becca Rose Bissett, are deliberately cliched. The black and white stripes of the prisoners, the maid outfit for the servant, the Keystone Cop uniform for the jailer, the garish floral coat for the mayor, and the Vegas showgirl ensemble for Miss Cake. They're simplistic, yet distinct and full of character. The same can be said for the set designed by Dr. Rob Lippert. The central fixture is the prison bars that sit on an upstage platform, looming over the audience. The platform, though, is brightly colored in yellows and blues, making them look like plastic or wooden baby blocks. There's a star motif all over the stage. Stars of different shapes hanging off of the prison bars over the ceiling. It almost looks like a crib mobile. There's even a starburst clock next to the platform stairs where the characters sit. One that has no hands on it, so you can't even tell the time. I think that's supposed to be symbolism for the prisoner's predestination to only exist as prisoners even since birth. I am completely dilated right now. Lippert worked with props designer Beth Burton Livorsi to craft some fun scenic touches. The banquet tabletop is one solid set piece. Everything on the table is glued onto the surface. The reveal that it's all one piece got a big reaction from the audience. The smaller table underneath it is painted with block colors that gets tilted towards the audience to create a simple backdrop for some scenes, changing the moment with just the placement of different objects. A picket fence for a front lawn, a frame for a window looking outside. The table even gets upturned so that the legs can be the support beams for a tree and a lamppost. Put a bench in front of it, bada bing, bada boom, you got a park. Even the chairs of the banquet hall get used for a pretty subtle bit of surreal humor that I won't spoil. You have to experience that for yourself. Lippert and Burton Livorsi make the scene transitions nice and easy, assisting with the staging's already fast pace. There is one other cool touch with the prison bars. They have LED lights on them, controlled by lighting designer Eric Wendland, to augment certain scenes that demand intense primary colored lights. Standouts include the cool blues of the banquet hall, featuring a brilliant spotlight for Miss Cake during Chicken Is He, the creepy reds and greens of the war zone, and the dark, all-consuming blue of the show's finale, All Is Well in the City. The rest of the lighting is minimal, but they keep the stage bright and clear amidst all of the nonsense happening. New Line Theater's production of Promenade is lightning in a bottle. If this were helmed by a lesser crew, it would have crashed and burned. And that's the reason why so many theaters have chosen not to mount it. Al Carmine's music and Maria Irene Fornez's libretto require a baseline understanding and appreciation for absurdist fiction in order to understand it, which some artists and audiences find intimidating. But New Line makes it look easy, effortless, accessible even. And it's all thanks to an enthusiastic cast, a lush jazz combo, creative visuals, and great directing. You know how I say that New Line shows can't be duplicated? I dare someone to replicate this. I genuinely want to see how far another company gets with this. If this is going to be the only chance to see Promenade for at least a long while, especially if you are a sucker for absurdist art like me, I implore you to run like a maypole in a war zone to the Marcel Theater for this potentially once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If you've already seen New Line Theater's production of Promenade, what did you think about it? Whatever it is, whatever you think, comment below and let me know. And if you enjoyed this review, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any more St. Louis musical theater reviews coming soon. Thanks for watching, and until next time, long live the musical.